studied about the education. First, it was aimed at slow and deep infusion of certain economic notions based on the widespread desire for land distribution. The object was political mobilization. And that's what Obama used to do too. On the other hand, the revolutionary struggle led Mao temporarily to occupy zones that were later abandoned, and frequently with much infiltration and a great flow of people back and forth. So, here the purpose was to leave an ideologically formed population behind when the revolutionary army had to withdraw. That's what I said in the last video. In the face of an enemy without any ideological weapon, this permitted Mao, little by little, to contaminate the enemy army when it occupied these territories. And these mosquitoes are biting 24/7 nowadays. Crap. I guess that's part of the lightning effect of the season. They're evaporating our blood away. Oh my god. To be sure, these zones could not be left too long without propaganda. Infiltration and partial occupation had to take place to renew and strengthen political education. At that stage, political education consisted in taking the prevailing misery. Actually, this is important. At that stage, political education consisted in taking the prevailing misery, the widespread oppression, and the spontaneous reactions against it as points of departure for providing coherent explanations. So everything that happens, the virus or the riots or just the feeling of oppression, they're all used for propaganda to provide coherent explanations, so things that make sense, that are explanations for all these bad things, for designating enemies who could serve to catalyze existing hatreds. So we have a common enemy that we can all unite to fight, and for sketching out the myth of liberation. So there's a myth that we're going to be liberated if we go crazy and riot or whatever else, or follow and get the shots, immunization shots. And for showing the means of that. If you like how how retarded I have sound on my recent videos, maybe you might want to get a shot too, become retarded like me. Anyway, that's just a theory, right? And for showing the means of that liberation. Okay, so sketching out the myth of liberation and showing the means of the liberation, cooperation of the people and adherence to communism. That's the end goal of the propaganda. So all these elements united into a solid whole. I'm going to take a break and read that again. Okay. That's my chinchilla. Rest of my live up. Keep your culture. So at this stage, political education consisted in taking the prevailing misery, the widespread oppression, and the spontaneous reactions against it as points of departure for providing coherent explanations, for designating enemies who could serve to catalyze existing hatreds. There's always the groups, the scapegoats, for sketching out the myth of liberation, and for showing the means of that liberation, cooperation of the people and adherence to communism, with all elements united into a solid whole. Alright. Organization. The propagandized people had to be inserted into a system. During the period of battle, Mao's organization contained three elements. So, the first is the peasant unions, designed to organize the peasants of a region, to disseminate slogans, and to explain them in discussion groups. These unions, with their very large membership and their very liberal orientation, were under the official direction of the party. So I think this is referring to all the terrorist groups today. Mao could say with justification, would it have been possible, even if he had set up tens of thousands of schools for political education, to educate all the men and women even in the remotest villages in so short a time? These peasant unions were neither combat nor action organizations, but large groupings to serve the purposes of psychological organization and polarization. So from the surface it looks like a very harmless club, but then look at what they're doing for Mao, right? They're inserting the people into a system and disseminating his slogans, and also discussing them in groups. They seem to have a liberal orientation and are official, and they're doing the job of the schools for adults. The second element was the famous parallel hierarchy. Side by side with the official administration of the enemy government, a clandestine, revolutionary, and complete administration was being built. This administration had its own finances, its own police, and very precise propaganda functions. The point was, Mao said, to mobilize the masses by resorting to organization work. So I guess this is a hierarchy, this is a secret power structure. While the enemy is still in power, they've built a secret power structure. So just like the conspiracy theorists say, it's like when there's an election going on, the other side has already been picked, and then the other side basically is secret until it gets in power. So I think that's what it refers to in our time. I don't know, maybe they are done with Trump, because all these riots and stuff. Either they're done with Trump or they're moving to Trump 2.0, which is a fascist Trump. First he was a people-friendly guy, then his fascist colors are going to come out, and all these riots are just preparation for that. So that's what it looks like at this point. Actually, this administration transformed general ideas and new views acquired as a result. Okay, so this administration transformed general ideas and new views. Okay, let me take a break. Too much. Very intense readings. Very intense readings. These flies ain't helping. Damn. What a terror. So this administration transformed general ideas and new views into action. So all the propaganda was transformed into action by this administration of the parallel hierarchy. Ration supplies, wages, and so on were determined. Social and economic transformation had to take place on the inside and secretly until it could be superimposed on prior organization. And the participation of the individuals on all levels was needed to strengthen the conviction. Okay. So all the changes were done secretly in the secret society, within the secret society, and then it was superimposed on the prior organization. And however, all the individuals on all levels were needed to strengthen the conviction that this transformation was not imposed from outside and above. So it was always made to seem like the people were doing it on their own, just like the rioters today. Nobody sees that they're being controlled by government forces or powerful forces. No, they just happen to be from the people. So it seems. So the methods of mobilizing the masses must not be bureaucratic, Mao said. The parallel hierarchy was called upon to make propaganda in every instance in order to create a sense of participation in the common work, with Mao knowing full well that soon as this feeling of participation was acquired, all action would provide its own justification and would involve the individuals more deeply. So what this is saying is that all these riders are there, but also like people have started wearing masks, like it was done to safeguard themselves. When all the science and theory shows that a mask actually makes a sneeze more dangerous by helping it propel a further distance. The virus, at least, even though less quantity of mucus might get out, but the air that gets out becomes more dangerous. So knowing that, we see how we were all made to participate in every instance in all these social distancing and all the mask wearing and all the other stuff. We were made to participate in every instance, and this action would involve everybody more deeply. And this didn't seem bureaucratic. It seemed like it came from the people only, the people demanding to be safe. But then actually it was bureaucratic. It was all done with special planning and secretly. As many of the movies reveal, that all of these things were planned in advance. So yeah, Mao often insisted that the creation of the parallel hierarchy could serve no purpose without this propaganda designed to lead people to act spontaneously. So people have to think that they're acting on their own, but it's all being done by these secret organizations, as is explained in this paragraph. You might want to read it again. Really brilliant. This guy writes very succinctly, but every word packs a punch. So finally, the third propaganda organization was the army. So this is, I think, it's talking about the Antifa groups, or Black Lives Matter groups. The third propaganda organization was the army. The Chinese Red Army is an armed organization fulfilling the political tasks of the revolution. It has important tasks to fulfill: propaganda among the masses, organization of the masses, and so on. The Red Army does not make war for war's sake. This war is a war for propaganda in the midst of the masses. So that's the truth. War is not just done for selling weapons, even though nowadays that's a big incentive. War is mainly done to increase the effectiveness of propaganda, because they say it takes 50 years of propaganda in peacetime to change a culture, but during wartime it takes 5 years. So everything moves 10 times faster in wartime. So the first task was to shape the soldiers of that Red Army, to teach them why they had to fight, to brainwash them. That's what he means by shaping them. And then to turn them into propagandists and carriers of propaganda. They had to live symbiotically with the civilians in order to conquer the people ideologically and progressively assimilate them. So they lived amongst us, they live, and they were conquering us the whole time and assimilating us into their propaganda, progressive propaganda. Such propaganda methods are subtle and numerous. They cover the whole gamut, from terror to indoctrination, from parades to involvement in action. But it can take place only in the case of a strictly popular army. This emerges from the famous and oft-repeated formula. So it can only be done when it's done popular. That's why they're popularizing all these riders, because the army of the 12 monkeys has to be known about. This emerges from the famous and oft-repeated formula: the army must function among the people like a fish in water. This implies that such an army must be recruited from the population, express it, find support in it, share its interests, never act as it would in a conquered country, serve the public, and that its struggle have positive meaning for the people. If these prior conditions are not fulfilled, no propaganda instrument can be made out of the army. The Red Army is a propaganda apparatus because it is formed on the basis of ideology and because its presence mobilizes the people. They have no choice but to participate and to become involved. So, because it involves all these factors, such as coming from our population, expressing our views, finding support in our population, sharing our interests, and always acting like a servant, not as a conquering person. And if the struggle they have has a positive meaning for us, then we will be conquered by their propaganda of any kind of army. So that's something to be aware of, and that's for all the soldiers out there who want to fight all these communist motherfuckers. And Jacques Ellul, let me tell you why you should read this book. It's a far more frightening work than any of the nightmare novels of George Orwell. With the logic, which is the great instrument of French thought, Ellul explores and attempts to prove the thesis that propaganda, whether its ends are demonstrably good or bad, is not only destructive to democracy, it is perhaps the most serious threat to humanity operating in the modern world. Some guy from the Los Angeles Times said that. The theme of propaganda is quite simply that when our new technology encompasses any culture or society, the result is propaganda. Ellul has made many splendid contributions in this book. So I'm currently using technology, and I'm also engaging in propaganda. But it's a frightening novel because it has so much truth in it. It's really scary how real his messages are and how vastly we've been indoctrinated and mind controlled in this new millennium. 2020, I've got the dope ass books for y'all. Propaganda. Alright, be thinking about dropping me a donation in the future, you know? For now, you can just press the like button. But in the future, think about doing some kind of PayPal donation to people like us living on the edge. Peace.